two different concepts, or BRRR can incorporate the 1% rule. So the 1% rule is a concept that's used for like turnkey properties. So just plug and play, you either have somebody in it already, or the property's already in really good shape, maybe somebody renovated it before they sold it, and it will just make a good rental. You don't have to do anything to it as far as rehab goes. You could then just use the 1% rule, which is that, you know, your rent, whatever it is, should be 1% of whatever your all-in is. So if you buy a $200,000 house, you should be getting $2,000 a month in rent. If you buy a $180,000 house, you should be getting $1,800 a month in rent.
And we'll go through that here in a little bit, where we actually break down these numbers and make sense of that just a little bit more. The other thing that you might just, in order to be very accurate on your numbers, because the more accurate you are on your numbers, obviously the better off you're going to be profit-wise and so on, is that the hold. So we calculated the buy, hold, sell with our flips. The hold might be a little bit longer, because at this point you have to find a renter and you have to go through the refinance process. So it shouldn't be that much longer. I mean, we calculate anywhere from 4 to 5 months for our flips. We do 6 months for rentals. So it isn't that much crazier, but just another side note. Buy will be the same. Hold, you might calculate a little bit longer. When it comes to refinancing, just make sure that you do know your numbers. Like Jen and I are very much, we've learned this, to be sticklers of the numbers. I'd rather be, if I'm wrong, I'll make more. Right, so we want to know every number that's going to go into every detail of the flip or rental. In this case, the rental. Jen, you want to talk a little bit about just refinancing, kind of the loan to value, that kind of thing?
Yeah. And one of the main things that you need to know is like whoever your bank is that's refinancing. So say you're using a small time credit union, or you're using like Severance Savings Bank around here. You're going to want to know what their loan to value is. Like, will they do 75%? Will they do 80%? Will they do 85%? Like, what is their LTV going to be when you refinance? How much value are they going to let you pull out of that? So
does that make sense to everybody, the LTV, loan to value? You got to get that good.
Yeah, because that's going to determine basically how much you should be into the house for. So like going into the example here, if I were to buy a house for $100,000, and I put 60 grand into it, my buy hold was 20 grand, I'm all in for 180. So when I refinance it, I'm going to want the property to be worth at least 225 if I can pull 80% LTV, right? Because if it's 225, that means that I get all of my money back out, and I can reinvest all of my money into something else. That also means the roll up into the 1% rule, which is $1,800. If I'm all into it for 180 grand, I want to know that it's going to rent for $1,800. And in the perfect scenario, that's your rental in a nutshell as far as the two different concepts go.
Yeah. So when you're refinancing, you just need to know what's the LTV, how much are they willing to give you. And then whatever that number is, that's what you need to get, that 75, 85, or 80% of the ARV, so you can pull all your money back out, right? Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't do it, but if you're not, say this was only 200, that just means that when you refinance, that some of your money will be left in the rental. So you'll get most of it back, you just won't get all of it. But we're trying to get all of our money back so we can.
Can you go back, how did you get the 225?
180 is 80% of 225.
Yeah, so this is just a hypothetical number, but it's 80%, or this is 80% of that. So we're saying that we would be able to pull all our money out. Right? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's in that buy hold fee of $20K?
So like for instance, if I were to buy something, I would use private money.
Yeah.
So I would have my points, and my insurance for the investment is going to be higher. And just transfer taxes and everything else that goes into buying it. And then holding, I'm going to have a payment from month to month for my private money. So that's going to roll into my hold cost. So, just for the example, I just rounded it to 20 grand.
Yeah. Really, it's the cost of buying that house and then the cost of holding it for the 6 months is where we came up with the 20. So this is your all-in number, right? You bought it for 100, your renovation was 60, and then to buy it and hold it was 20, so that was the 180. So in this example, we just need the ARV to be 225 to pull all our money back out. And then following the 1% rule, 1% of our all-in, that's how much we want our rent to be. Oh, if I'm not, yeah, well, exactly. And just kind of a general rule of thumb for Jen and I, everyone's different, but we try to make sure on each rental that you get $500 profit from each rental.
And that's net profit.
Net profit, right? Because the idea is you're not gonna make a fortune off of one rental. The idea of rentals is that you have a portfolio of them. So if you can have, 500 here, 500 there, 500 here, 500 there, cool, right? Now you're starting to get a lot of that passive income. Obviously, if you can get more, I mean, that's beautiful, but we shoot for 500 is the number on each rental.
How long is your money tied up? Like, how long do you have to wait before you can refinance?
That's a great question. So, it's different per lender. Alright, so, I'm just gonna use Severn Savings Bank as an example. I believe that their term is they want to have a renter in place for 3 months before they will allow you to count the rent on your loan application as an investment property underneath of a company, like an LLC. So, that's a great question that you brought up. It varies from lender to lender. Some of them don't care. Some of them don't require any tenant seasoning. But some of them do want the tenants to be in place for a few months before they will allow you to refinance it out.
Yeah, which only means that your hold will just be a little bit higher, right? So, once again, factoring those things in, and that's a great question that you ask up front when you find out the LTV, you're also gonna find out those questions, how seasoned, do the renters need to be? Does this make sense to everybody? I wanna make sure this makes sense, because really that's the kind of the nutshell of it all, right? Yeah, and then just kind of like some side stuff to rentals. You have two options. You can be the landlord, right, property management company, or you can hire a property management company. Jen and I prefer to have that company do it. Because generally speaking, they take care of everything, if they're good, right? Once again, as always, you need to vet them, just like contractors or anybody else. But they should take care of the screening of rentees, They'll be able to manage the repairs on the property. If they gotta take care of evictions or inspections, negotiations, terminations, collection of rents, a good property management company will take care of all those, so you don't have to. It's just basically leverage, which goes into everything that we teach here, is just getting someone else to do it, especially if you have one, who cares, right? Like, you can do that.
You calculate the cost of the property management company in your number?
Yeah. So that's where you'll just wanna interview, 2 or 3 and
So
find out.
with those numbers of the property management company, you're still netting 500 properties?
Yes.
Yes, yep,
The whole idea behind rentals is passive income, right?
right.
So if you got 10 of them, and you gotta be involved with all of them.
That's not passive anymore. Right, that's why I said with one, it's not that big of a deal, right? Because, you can go over there and then you'll have renters too, I'll just tell you right now. Some of them, you'll never hear from them. They're awesome, right? Like, they fix everything, something happens, they're like, yeah, we had a hole in the roof, don't worry, I patched it. You're like, I want 19 of you, man, I love you. And then you'll have other ones that are like, yeah, I don't know, the light bulb just doesn't turn on anymore. You're like, did you put a new one in? Like,
Did you
"Oh."
flip the switch?
Yeah, I don't know, that scares me. You're like, okay. So, when you have one, and you can do it, but once you start getting 2, 3, and once you get into double digits, even changing light bulbs, right, becomes almost a waste of time. You're like, I can't do this. So then it becomes a lot more worth your while having that property management company take care. And then, let's be honest, who wants to evict people? That's not fun. Nobody wants to go through and tell people, you can't live here anymore, I'm tired of you. Tired of seeing your face, get out. And collecting rents if they're late. It's nice to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, did we get our rent? No, we'll go get it. Right? Versus going to the person, hey, did I get my rent? What's your problem? Where is it? Because once again, having rentals, the investment side is awesome. However, it doesn't mean that there aren't headaches along with it. So definitely, something to think about if you get 1 or 2, maybe not a big deal. Once you start getting a handful of rentals, start thinking about that.
What are you guys paying for property management fees? You don't mind me asking roughly.
So,
We're about 120.
yeah.
A month, yeah.
Well, but we also,
not
we
like
have it
a
pretty
percentage
good.
of the rent?
We'll send your dad.
Yeah.
We have, since we have the flipping side, we can send those guys over there. So, you know, I don't know, is 120
Yeah.
the average?
Yeah, for full service, somebody, like a company that handles everything,
Yeah,
you know, and you're basically hands off, just receive a direct deposit, it's probably about 120 bucks.
yeah,
It's 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's 20%.
It's not 10%?
No, it's not 20%.
I'll look at.
no,
the
20% would be really high.
Yeah, I'll look at the company that I said, I'll look at the company
Yeah.
and shoot it out.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, and then the other thing too, I guess, just to kind of keep in mind is the property like newer, nicer? Because then you probably also, it won't be that much of a headache. So I would say if you have more than 3 rentals and they're all older, it would definitely, and anything beyond that, like it'd be worth thinking about getting a property management. If you have 1 or 2 or even 3, but they're all nicer and newer, and you're okay with doing a few things, then you could save that, you know, and probably do it yourself. It really all comes down to you, but I guess you just gotta kind of figure that
Still
out.
a headache.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a very nice unit, but the problem is that your tenants can be dumb as to how they use appliances and everything. And
Yep.
I found I was going constantly for a washer and dryer that was only 5 years old,
Yeah,
getting in service,
Yeah.
because they don't let the sock fall behind the drum.
right.
I mean, something so simple. I
Yeah.
mean, But a sock fell down in there and it burned out the motor.
Yeah,
Cause they still kept trying to,
Yeah.
it's not sounding right, you guys, that means you stop.
yeah.
Call me.
Yeah, I mean, we get called, like the last time we got one because the garage door wouldn't shut, so they had like a whole day where their garage door was wide open. And I went over there and I just adjusted the laser within like 2 seconds, literally. It was almost embarrassing. I went over there, I'm like, you mean this thing? Oh. Yeah, I'm like, thank you for bringing me over, that was sweet. So, but yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just I guess, you know, something to think about with all that. So anything that you wanted to
No.
add on that?
No, and then just to show you guys how it kind of works backwards into, you know, when we started, we said flips are good rentals also. Because if you look down here, like working the numbers backwards with the flipping formula, the 70% rule, if you look at the ARV of 225 and do 70% of that minus repairs, it gives you 97,500, which is really close to what this buy is. So if you work the numbers backwards, even with the flipping 70% rule, you should be in the green when it comes to the BRRRR concept if it's a house that needs a renovation.
Right. Yeah, so that's just an example of how flips make good rentals, and rentals, generally speaking, make good flips. Generally speaking, I mean, it's obviously gonna be harder to rent a, you know, $5,000, $600,000 square foot house than it is, you know, a smaller Cape Cod in Catonsville. But generally speaking, if you do your numbers right, you should be able to reverse them, and it would make sense because with the 70% rule, right, you need 30% margins on a flip. Well, here, you know, we need the 20% in the LTV, and then, you know, just how all your other numbers work out, profit and stuff that you want, they actually work out to be pretty similar. So it's just kind of a nice way to be able to look at them both, you know, in the same light. I don't know, does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Cool. So for the most part, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of finding rentals, what you're looking for, how the numbers should break down. So does anybody have any questions on that?
When you're, just to get back to working with investors, I mean, are you finding that a lot of people are working with similar numbers, or it's kind of an industry standard, if you will? I guess to determine whether you even want to work with them.
Well, right now, I think people are paying way too much for houses.
Way too much, way too much.
The investors are?
Investors.
Investors are, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, and maybe you guys are already hearing of it now, I wouldn't be surprised if in 6 months from now, or even a year from now, we're hearing all the stories about people who lost their butts. Because I know that, Jen and I know the numbers very well. And yes, they might be able to work on tighter margins, right? Because maybe they are a contractor and they don't have to pay that guy. However, their numbers aren't that much different than ours. So if Jen and I can only pay $150 for a house and we see it goes for $210, nobody's making money on the house. I know that. Like, there's just no way. How could they? Unless they have, you know, they're planning on selling it for $50,000 more than we thought.
Well, because the contractor still has to use the realtor.
So, right, the contractor still has
Economies
a
of
different.
scale that they've got. more people?
So, I mean, we've got some guys that we work with that send us stuff, and we actually just had lunch with one of them, 2 weeks ago, was it?
Yeah.
We met with Sean. And he said even the houses that they're sending out to their investors have 15 to 20% margins on them.
Yeah,
So unless you're cash and you don't have any points to pay or
Yeah.
holding costs,
that's it.
like, there's no room on anything
Yeah.
to make any.
Or what we are seeing right now is people are paying way too much because they just want to keep their guys working.
Yeah.
So they're not worried about making 50,000 or 40,000 or whatever they're trying to make on their flip. They just have to keep their guys busy. So they'll pay the extra 50, 60 and make nothing on it, but cool, I kept my guys busy for 4 months.
Yeah, and if I get lucky and, you know, maybe I can push the comp a little bit, maybe I'll make 10 grand.
Right, right.
You know, so-
But that's why you're seeing so many wholesalers now, because they're like, man, instead of taking that huge risk, I can just snatch the property up, have someone else flip it, shoot them the property, I make my 20 real quick, and let them go and do all the work and all the headache. So, right now, you're seeing a lot of people paying too much. You're seeing a lot of wholesalers who will try to sell you on anything. I mean, how many times did they send you deals like, look at this great deal we got, and you're like, there's nothing on
It's
this.
like a 3,000 square foot house with 70 grand in margin, like, really?
Yeah, you're like, how am I supposed to buy, hold, sell in that $70,000? There's just no way.
Yeah, the one guy the wholesaler that sends me stuff all the time, I sent him addresses of houses that we've done in the past, and he's like, wow, like, you had space on those, I'm like, yeah, I made money on them too.
Right, and everybody, yeah, did well on that. So, yeah, that's pretty much the breakdown, guys. That's how you find your rentals. Those are the key things you're looking for, key points, the 1% rule. That's not hard and fast, it does, if you're close, right? The BRRR Concept, just, you know, follow that, you'll be okay. And then, you know, talk to your bank and figure out whoever you're working with, like the LTV, how seasoned do the renters need to be, just find out those questions. And then, you know, make sure your numbers work, obviously. And then from there, you could just start kind of finding a portfolio of little homes that meet that. I mean, heck, if you did one per year over 5 years and you got 5, like, that's a great little portfolio that you can start to build.
Question on taxes, because I wanna know how to be, smart about the process when you are holding properties.
I don't think you wanna ask me that then.
Yeah.
I don't wanna be the one that advises on taxes.
No, not advise on taxes specifically, I mean, you would talk to a tax person, but
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, you would know more about telling your tax guy, look.
I wouldn't put it in your personal name, I'd put it in an LLC. Each
definitely.
rental should be in an LLC.
Mhm.
Its
Don't
own
you have to
LLC.
buy, just
Huh?
personally guarantee it? If you're not
Well,
counting.
your lender may require you to personally guarantee it, but as far as
And
like,
then buy a person to put it in LLC.
but the tenant that you put in it, like the reason behind the LLC is personal protection,
Right.
right? So if you're putting your properties into individual LLCs, say the renter on 123 Main Street wants to sue you, at least they can only go after 123 Main Street LLC. They can't go after everything else, because if you have it in your personal name, they didn't have access to your personal assets. If you have it in one single LLC, then they have access to everything else that LLC holds. I mean, we had a scenario where we had properties in one LLC and we had a past buyer that wanted to come after us for something, and, you know, luckily, it's like, you know, our attorney was like, did you sell everything off? We're like, yeah, the LLC has nothing,
Yeah.
so go ahead.
Yeah, but that's more of definitely a talk with your CPA. You know, I wanna make sure that you get the right information on
I
that.
know, look, I understand the official, I was just asking
Yeah.
for some of the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Cause
Yeah.
I'm gonna get you in prison or something.
Yeah. I have no money.
Someone else have a question over here? Mark, did you have a question?
No, it's just, it doesn't pertain to an LLC, but on an individual basis, if somebody's interested in purchasing an investment property, they can actually do a home style renovation loan without having to go through without having to go through the refinance process. But it only works in an individual name, and they can borrow up to 85% on the property. If you're doing a cash out refinance on an investment property, again, as an individual, you can go up to 75% loan to value. So that makes it a little bit easier. And one other thing too that most people don't know, that on the HUD home store, any of the HUD foreclosures, investors can purchase and finance under a 203K with 15% down. So if you're just looking to buy a property for purely investment purposes, then that's a really good source also.
Well, those HUD homes are expensive to me.
Well, it
Because
depends,
something
you know,
that
what they were
works, you
saying
know.
is absolutely true. The problem is that, you know, there's all these tweeners in the marketplace right now, where there's not enough meat on the bone to flip it. However, if you're interested in holding it for an extended period of time, you can still get into it, renovate it, and hold it as a rental without paying full retail based off of those numbers, if you just use their formula. You may not get the 70% rule, but even if an investor walked into a property for $300,000 all in, and he's making 10%, that's $30,000, that's a $270,000 all-in price. So that's still a good deal for him, if he's gonna hold it long-term.
Right,
And
right.
that's the key, the long term.
Right, right, because the time can forgive some of the, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Any other questions?
How do you adjust the numbers when, so they're forecasting, we're already hearing from the west that a correction is
It's
coming this
brewing.
way? Yeah, how do you adjust your numbers when it becomes a declining market?
This is just my opinion, and Jonah and I have talked about this a lot over the past year, because, I mean, we want to buy more rentals, but I'd want a bigger margin if I were buying them now,
Yeah,
which doesn't exist, or I'm just not gonna buy them now.
yeah,
Because if you think about, Jonah touched on it before, all investments, when they're good investments, you buy low and sell high. Right now, even foreclosures are high.
yeah.
Even right now, there's no margin on any investment properties, you know, like our buddy was saying, 15 to 20%, and that's what we were seeing too. We just wanted to make sure that we weren't like missing something somewhere.
Right, I mean, we keep asking everybody, we're like, are you seeing the same thing? You see it? And
You know,
everybody's
but-
saying it, yeah.
You know, I'd either have to have, like I told Jonah, like if I came across a house that actually had a true 30% margin and it was a great rental, I'd go after it. But right
Yeah.
now, like even, yeah, I don't know, it's just, we'd be buying high.
Yeah,
And if a correction comes, we don't know how long that correction's gonna last for, or
Well-
how low it's gonna go. And then if, you know, we're put into a situation where we have to sell, then we're selling low.
yeah,
Even if our intention is to hold for long term, so.
right, right.
Do you suggest it until they?
Correction.
So,
The
what I,
truth is,
here's,
you don't wanna be in a situation where if you have to sell, you have to sell now.
right,
Exactly.
right.
Don't put yourself in that, you
So-
know, like if you have to sell over time, you're better off.
Right, right. So, yeah, really to sum up what Jen was saying is, we're not buying rentals right now. Because this is a time where everything is clearly selling out, just like in 2005, like, so everyone says that they buy low and sell high, right? They all wanna follow the investing model. Well, what happened in 2005?
Five or six.
Yeah, everyone was buying high, and in the market crash, what did they all have to do? They all had to sell. So they did the exact opposite of how we invest. They bought high and sold really low. So we can see that now, right? We saw that just 10 years ago, so now we get to look forward and we get to replay it. We get to see what happened and we know it's coming, like Mike was just saying, we're already seeing little bits and pieces of it. So why would we be buying rentals right now when we know we're high? When maybe even a year from now, we could buy low.
Yeah, the deal was, at that point, if you weren't overly leveraged, it was actually a really good time to own, because what ended up happening is our rents went up 10%
Sure.
right away.
Yeah,
Because the people who couldn't afford to stay in their houses needed
Yeah.
rent.
yeah.
So it actually turned out to be good, as long as you weren't over leveraged on your rentals.
Yeah, and that's also the kind of touch on, like you said, the longer term thing. If you're gonna be in an investment for a long time, then who cares what it does? You know, because the market over time will always be higher. 20 years from now, it'll be higher than it is today, no matter what. I guarantee it, it always is.
The only
It may
folks
not be a
we had
great
that were hurt
market.
were the people that were over leveraged on a lot of, like, all
Yeah.
their properties were highly leveraged. They
Yeah.
got crushed.
Yeah,
The
so that's a
people
great
who
point
were
that Mike
leveraged,
brings up.
They did well.
Yeah, that's a great point that Mike brings up. If you can buy rentals right now and you can do it without overextending your finances and everything, and you find a good deal, right, then I guess there's always a good time if you're in that position. However, will those same rentals maybe be cheaper in a few months, in a year or two? There's a good chance they will be, so,
Rentals are kind of going up right now, actually.
well, it's kind of like Mike was just saying, like rentals in the recession actually went up, right? So then it's a great time to have yours, so.
Well, it's
once-
supply and demand, everybody was losing their homes and.
Right.
They needed a place to stay.
But it's so funny though, but the landlords are being, somebody has gone through that, but they're being so tough on them about having a profession, that it's hard for people to even get rentals now.
Yeah.
rentals stay on the market for a long time because the landlords want only this and that only. You know?
Yeah.
And that's what's happening, but a lot of times I have had people who have excellent rental background,
Yeah,
just went through some things a couple of years ago.
right, yeah, and just wait a few months, they'll get a little more lenient, right? When everything changes, it happens, right? Everybody gets lenient when they can't find what they need. So,
Is any particular banks that you guys find, it's good to use, to do business with as far as refinances?
So one thing that I would say is the one that you have a relationship with is probably the best one because generally speaking, you know, they're the ones that know you, trust you, and they'll, you know, be able to work with you. Do we have any that like just we don't have better numbers?
Severn Savings Bank is very investor
I know
friendly.
Howard Bank, a few of them are
Howard
using
Bank
those.
is very investor friendly. Our person up at Point Breeze Credit Union
What's
and
the,
is very investor friendly.
what was, Bryant, who was here,
Basically,
he's more
local
private
banks
money.
are gonna be.
Severn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
local banks are gonna be better than any of your big time banks. The only time the big time banks are more beneficial is when you have buku cash in the bank and like, you're somebody to them, you know?
Right,
So,
right.
it's,
Yeah.
when you're not somebody to them yet, the big banks don't care.
That's a great
Even then, they're not.
point you bring up, because it does seem like the smaller banks are more willing to work with
They're
you.
more
and the
flexible,
numbers- Yeah.
big banks, you're either in the box, you're
Yes,
outside the
it's
box.
very much rigid, and did you fit, did you not?
Credit unions, you know, credit unions, everybody has a credit union that they personally bank with.
Yeah, so I would say start with the ones that you have a relationship with and see what they can do. And then, yeah, I mean, one of our mentors, he gave us like a list of like 10 of them, and I don't think I've heard of like 8 of the banks.
Yeah.
They're just, yeah, they were like little small banks, but those are how he funded a lot of his deals, because they had just really good terms for him. So, anything else that comes to mind? Okay, all right, guys, well, that's it. That's how to find rentals and how to work with investors in a quick nutshell. So, awesome.
Thank you. Cool.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. Is it good? You got at least a little bit of information?